From the shores of Puget Sound, this is GreenerViews, a unique media resource for information, education, consultation, and fun. GreenerViews is a part of the Healthy Homecast network and is brought to you exclusively by healthypainting.com and ambrosiadigitalmedia.com. Each episode will introduce and connect you with services, products, practices, organizations, and groups that focus on the health, happiness, safety, well-being, charity, and community of all. Find us on the web at www.greenerviews.net. And now, your host, Daryl Whalen.
Okay, good evening and welcome to episode 37 of GreenerViews. I'm Daryl Whalen here with Randy Parcel, the audio engineer, and Michael Schwartz, video engineer. Joining us this evening is Andy Smallman from PSCS, the Puget Sound Community School,
That's
correct?
us. Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm a little dyslexic, so I might mix around the letters a few times, but GreenerViews is part of the Healthy Homecast network. GreenerViews is brought to you by healthypainting.com and ambrosiadigitalmedia.com. To advertise, be a sponsor, donate, to be a guest, to give us some ideas about good guests, contact us at greenerviews.net or call 206-650-4587. I don't think there was any P's in there to pop. So let's see. Let's get started here. What's that? Email? Info at greenerviews.net. Did I say that? Let's see. How I know the guest. So Andy is the founder.
That's right.
And the director.
That's what
I
they
guess
call
I
me.
will find out the actual specifics
Okay.
on that, of the Puget Sound Community School. I happen to have a couple of good friends that are either are currently teachers, have been teachers in the past, are part of the board, and I've had an opportunity to speak a couple of times and go down to the school. As we go along, I'll probably put in my 2 cents worth about my past educational experience and the experience I had at the school. But a big part is the kindness. Is it a kindness project or a kindness class?
It's how it started, kindness class.
The kindness class is something that Andy facilitates, and I'll talk about that. I had the opportunity to participate as a participant probably 2 or 3 years ago, and that was really cool. So welcome, Andy, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Daryl. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. So give us let's start off with the school first. Give us the brief elevator pitch. What is the Puget Sound Community School?
Well, first, I like the idea of a brief elevator speech. I think I need a tall building to explain PSCS.
Get one floor. No, it doesn't have to be brief. It could be as long as you want.
We got an hour, right? Yeah. So I need a tall building and a slow elevator.
Okay.
So PSCS, or Puget Sound Community School, is founded really on what I think is a fairly simple principle. It's if you can create a loving and nurturing educational environment for children, you don't have to cram stuff in. You don't have to force it on students. They'll do it naturally. They'll learn things that are important to them, and they'll learn things for life as opposed to learning for a test and then forgetting. So the real concept of PSCS is about character and about environment. So our job is to create a nurturing environment where kids feel safe and cared for, and then expose them to people of good character who have exciting things that they're doing. And that's what you would have been brought into the school to do, is to be an example of somebody who's doing something of interest that the students might go, hey, that sounds interesting. Or one way that I like to put it is, that Daryl character, he's a nut, but he sure likes what he's doing. I want the feeling that he gets when he's doing that.
Yeah.
So it's that type of thing, that we want the students to feel connected to people, and we want to help them find things that are important to them. And then when those things come together, the end result, which I often call the byproduct, is some important learning. And you end up with people who are strong and solid and want to move on and take on challenges in their lives. So there you go. There's a very quick nutshell, and there are many more directions I can take that.
So let's get into the logistical, the history of it.
Sure.
When did it start?
You got it.
The how and the why.
That's another long elevator ride,
Okay.
right?
We got plenty of time.
So some of the how and the why, I oftentimes tell people there's a long story and there's a longer story. And so maybe we'll go in between or something. But part of it traces my own public school education experience. And where I've come to really look at things is that back when I was in third grade, I had a particular experience that I think really is part of the founding experience of PSCS. It was a classic early 1970s experience where I was in a class with a teacher who was the very school marm stereotype, who was in charge and you did what she said. And if you didn't, you were in big time trouble. And even if you did do what she said, but you weren't moving fast enough, you were in big time trouble. And the classic experience I had was she wanted me to move from one place to another, as she did other students. And I was a really sensitive kid, and she would move you by your earlobe. So she would literally grab you by the ear and move you where she wanted you to go. So how this has to do with the founding of PSCS I can get to, but that's one piece to it. Is what that did to me is soon thereafter I started developing night terrors, and had a pretty rough next couple of years involving counselors and trying to figure out why I was so upset. And what I did was internalized a lot of fear. Fast forward now, 8-9 years, and I'm in high school, and in my senior year, I wanted to graduate at the semester. I would have had enough credits to be really close, but what I needed was an occupational education credit, which is one of those, full credits that you need to line up with your 19 in order to graduate. And I needed a half credit to graduate at the semester, and then go on and do what I wanted to do outside of school the second semester. So I went to my counselor and I said, listen, I'm the night manager of a bookstore. I work a 40-hour week. I make the night deposit. I work by myself from 5:30 to 9:30 every night, making the night deposit. I do the accounting for the books, for the sales for the day. Could that be a half a credit in occupational education? I'm 17 years old at the time, and the counselor says, no, you can only get credit for what you do with a certified teacher. So I took a second semester accounting class. I sat in the class and wrote short stories while looking out the window and waited for the test to come, and got an A in the class and got, graduated from high school with, well, what do I want to do now? I sure as heck don't want more of that thing called education.
Not that type of education.
Not that type.
At least.
And I really didn't know that there was anything else.
Yeah.
And so that was a major pillar in the creation of PSCS. But this is still, moving. We got to move on a little bit. Yeah. So I didn't go to college. In fact, I didn't apply to any college. And because you're supposed to as a senior, I took the SAT and I scored off the charts. And the same counselor said, you can go to any school you want with that SAT score. And I kind of,
if this is what school likes,
why would I want to do that?
Go to school? Yeah.
So I had a buddy of mine who was up in Alaska. He's a little bit older than I am, and he hooked up with a guy who had a string of radio stations. And he said, "Hey, come on up and play radio with me." And so I moved to Seward, Alaska, about a year, little less than a year out of high school, and I spent a year being a top 40 radio DJ up in Alaska. And what that did is I started reflecting on some of my younger experiences. I started figuring out a little bit more of who I was. I came back down to Seattle. I volunteered in the Big Brother program. And that's where it really hit me, that I'm meant to work with kids. Yeah. And so I realized then that to do what I wanted to do, I should go to college. And I discovered the Evergreen State College at that particular point. And I think GreenerViews is a great title for your program. Yeah. You got a greener here. So I applied to one college, that was Evergreen. I got in with the intent of becoming a third grade teacher. But paths have a way of redirecting. But I went through Evergreen, loved it, said I was 22 when I started. Why couldn't I do this when I was 13? I went to grad school, got my teaching certificate, ended up being hired as a faculty member at a small elementary in Bellevue called The Little School, wrote my master's thesis about the experience, talked about what a student-centered middle and high school would look like, had a group of parents, who were interested in that. Pardon me. Get a drink. I get all excited talking about this, Daryl.
I'm excited about
me up. So
there's a lot of stuff going through my brain and my body,
and I can't
right now,
stop talking, can I?
That's quite all right.
So I had a group of parents that
there's no rules.
I love that. It's kind of like school, our school. So I had a group of parents who were interested in working with me to start something, and in 1994 we started the Puget Sound Community School.
Wow, 18 years ago.
We just finished our 18th year. I'm very proud of that. The first 7 years, we were a nomadic school, meaning we moved around depending on the day of the week. So we'd have 3 days that were still our class days or tutorial days where students take classes that they've prioritized and are interested in. Back in the early days of the school in the 90s, one of those days would be in Kirkland, another one would be in Redmond, another day would be in Seattle. And part of the education was not just what you did, but where you did it.
Yeah.
And so we worked as a nomadic school with that approach. And the state wouldn't approve us as a private school, which meant that we couldn't offer credits and diplomas and that sort of thing. So we would often have high schoolers leave. And so in 2001, 2002, we started looking into what would it be to get our state approval and found that we needed to have a site that would meet fire and health code. We transitioned to that in January of 2003. We got our state approval. And for the last 4 years, we've been in the International District in Seattle, where we have right around 40 kids. This coming year, we'll have in the mid-40s, 6th through 12th graders, and here we are entering our 19th year.
Wow.
But there's a long-winded story.
Oh, yeah, no, it's fantastic. I know myself, we're about the same age. We discovered that, and I grew up in, I would consider it what was likely a pretty typical public school in Ohio, and I'll be completely honest with you, I just had an extremely bad experience with it, and I came up in a relatively rough childhood and rough family, and then I went into this public school that was just as rough, if not worse, and I went through going through school thinking that there was something wrong with me and that I was different, and now I'm at a point in my life where I realize that I've always been this pretty amazing person and creative and everything, but nothing was being nurtured or anything, and like I said at the beginning, I've had a chance to come to your school a couple of times and talk in front of a class, and I've also been able to sit in the circle once in the morning, and then the other time was in the evening.
Nice.
And it was just, I'll be completely honest with you, it's been, about 3 or 4 years. How long has it been since you've been in the University Heights?
We just finished our 4th year in the International District, so
it was about 5 years ago.
Yeah, we moved out in what would have been the end of the 2007-2008 school year.
Yeah, and I can tell you right now, I talk about your school all the time, and I'm really excited about it when I talk about it, and the kids, and
well, that's one of the things that I tell people. I mean, people come in and they think, "What do you got? These special kids?" I said, "No, of course, everyone is special. But the thing that makes it stand out is that they're just really respected.
They're being honored and treated as the children and adults that they're becoming, and
that's right.
Yeah, and the people that they are, and
that's not
given
magic.
A chance. There's nothing magical about it.
It's simple
because we're all magical and we're all magic inside, and we just need an opportunity to nurture that and to be able to.
Let's switch seats. I'll interview you, and you tell about the school, because you're doing a great job.
Well, thanks. Well, it's I'm totally inspired by it.
That's great. I love it.
And the one thing I did fail to mention at the beginning is that we were talking about before is when I put this podcast together now, and this is episode 37, which is really exciting. You were on the list of people that were the ideal guests, and you went to France, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Right. Yeah, sabbatical.
But so let's talk about your principal roles and responsibilities as the director and that at the school right now.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. So I'm the founder, and really when I say that, there are other founders that were involved. Most significantly is my wife. And so she's the administrative director and co-founder of the school. And let me just say for a minute, that's the magic, if you want to go back to magic, is really what the two of us, Melinda and I, bring to the school. People have asked, how has a school like this been able to survive or be around and actually thrive and grow? And I say there's really two things. When I talk about the educational philosophy, people, whether they agree with me or not, usually pick up on the fact that I actually believe it, that it's really strongly felt, and that carries. And then the other thing, and we really talked a lot about this when we started the school, is that we set it up very legitimately. I don't mean to sound like there are illegitimate businesses out there, but Melinda's role has always been to cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure the paperwork's done, and we're a 501c3, and to make sure the IRS is satisfied and the city and the state, and all of those things. So we're very serious about what we do. So you get this crazy guy, me, out there talking about the school and hopefully inspiring one or two people, and then you get Melinda, who then makes it all happen behind the scenes. So those are the two things that combine and have really made the school work. So what do I do with it? Pretty much what I'm doing with you right now, except how that might manifest itself on a day-to-day basis with students. What I bring to it, I think that's important for me, is that I have a deep respect and caring for every individual. And I have, if I'm speaking of what I think my greatest strength is that I have a way for people to feel good about themselves when I talk to them, is that they feel heard and they feel respected. And I think that's my biggest strength as the director of the school. And then, as I said, the other piece is that generally when people talk to me, they whether they agree with me or not, they tend to feel like I'm pretty serious about it. So that's kind of stuff that I bring. I love to teach. I created a school. I had the philosophical vision, so the things about the school that are unique or really came out of my ideas. But I really created a school so I could teach the way I want to teach, which is to be with kids the way I want to be with kids, which is just to be a natural, interesting, I hope, human being, rather than being an extension of a textbook.
And the thing that's really, I mean, we could probably talk for hours on this stuff because I have a strong attachment and feeling to the whole ideas about the education system and everything. And, you know, you've really kind of threw me on my, kind of turned it all upside down for me. But the great thing about it is, the thing that I know about it is you're teaching in an environment where you're also allowing the children or the kids to be teachers as well.
Right. That's right.
And that's what's really, really neat about it.
Yeah, there's lots of things like that, because we say if you're interested in something and you know something, you are going to know something more than somebody else, and somebody else is going to want to know what you know, and you become a teacher if you want to share it. Yeah. And one of the things that we think is within the school that's natural to being a human being is you want to share. That's when you like something. Why did you bring me in to talk to me? It's something that you like to share what you're good at, what you're doing, and you're doing this wonderful podcast. And so it's just that when humans come together that way, it just grows. It's bigger than the individual pieces.
Well, we're all in this together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, the beauty is that that people contribute and participate equally in that arrangement, and it's not this like domination and submission type of a relationship. It's I mean, there's adults and there's the head of the school, and there are the teachers, but it's a extremely equal. It's on a relatively equal playing ground.
One of the things that I tell the students is that the staff will bring something called experience, and that's worth something, but it's only worth as much as they want it to be. Yeah. And so if I can develop a relationship with somebody, they'll value and trust my experience more than if I tell them, well, because I told you so, or whatever, which really never works anyway. So I just want the students to feel comfortable with who I am, and I do have something to bring, but I have to earn the right to share that. And so that's what we work on in the environment that we try to build within the school. And then what the students bring is that everyone's unique and everyone is different. And so what we want to do is respect that and say, hey, it's okay, and that they can say no.
So, I have something here. So how many students have you, in the last 18 years, how
many students have we had enrolled? We were Melinda was just doing a tally on this, and I think we just hit 200 over the course of the year. So
200 in 18 years.
In 18 years, I mean, we keep students. We keep students a long time, and it's purposefully kept fairly small. Yeah. But I have talked about how it could be grown in other ways. Yeah. We're looking to go ultimately from 6th through 12th grade, which is what we're serving now, but maybe as many as 75 to 80. But we have to stage the growth, or we lose what makes it special. But yeah, 200 overall in the 18 years.
Well, in my mind, in my heart, the ultimate goal is that all schools would take on a similar type of approach to this, and so it would never be 200. It would always be as many kids as there were in school.
Yeah, and that's been one of the things that I talked about as well, and sometimes I even am asked to talk about how I might see that working. Yeah.
So what about so we're talking about 18 years down the road? Is there any not that each and every individual of the 200 isn't its own success story, but is there any stats about the success?
You know, that's interesting. One of the things that we have not done well, and I don't think there's a lot of things we haven't done well, but we haven't kept as good track of alums. We get very focused on taking care of the students that are enrolled. But I can tell you, some of the stories of people that have stayed in touch. One of the classics that usually is the first one told is this boy who came into the school. He would have started in 2002, and he was probably a ninth grader, so 14, 15 years old. And when he came into the school, he was really into BMX bikes, and he was into the MTV show Jackass. Do you remember that show?
Oh, sure.
And so he was this classic, I want to film myself on my bike doing stunts and
Ouch.
things. So we said that was fine, and we would create space. And we talked about how he needed to work to keep himself safe and all of these things. But we simply didn't say, no, you can't do that, which most schools would be scared of. But we were like, okay, you're interested. Let's see where this goes. Well, it quickly moved on to other things. He got interested in T-shirt design, so we got him hooked up where he could actually do an apprenticeship with a shop that was doing T-shirts, and with his BMX bike interests. Soon after that, he went a little bit further. He was taking a small business class that was being offered in the school as well. But he started a record label. By the time he was 17, he had CDs that he had produced and music videos that he had produced, CDs that were at Tower Records on the Ave.
Cool.
And started a record label. And by the time he was a senior, he and two other students were flying to New York to sign bands.
Wow.
It was just that type of thing, because we never told him he couldn't do it. And what we said is, that's what school's about, is to create this. And so he's one of those grand stories of kids that weren't stopped from this spirit that they had. So that's one. We've had other students. We had one who years ago said he wanted to go to college where Netscape was created. So it was the University of Illinois. So
okay.
he ended up graduating from University of Illinois. He now works for Google in New York and has for a while. And then he's one of the school's big funders now. He's making some nice donations with his family. So, I can go on with other stories, but some of them, are just very unique. The tattoo artist who was in art school, to the kids that right now are happy as can be at the college that just beat Harvard in the, what do they call it, the National Survey of Student Engagement. There are a lot of happy kids. That's really what I say is most important. It's not what they're doing, it's how they're doing it, with a sense of self and a sense of happiness, and that they feel dialed in and connected, and they're not contributing to the planet falling apart, or whatever other concern might be. They're good people, is what I'd say.
So there's something that you like to say: academics are the byproduct of a good education.
That's right. That's one of my taglines now. So here's my point.
Tell us what that means.
Sure. It's simple. That again, I don't think this is rocket science, but it's been made into something very complicated. And so we grow up and we buy into this idea that the reason you go to school is to learn academics. And that's what school's for, nothing else. And I actually say no. Academics are a byproduct to why you go to school. You go to school to learn to be a good person. You go to school to learn how to interact with other people. You go to school to build a sense of who you are and what you want to do in life. What happens when those things happen, when your character is building in a positive way, when you know who you are, when you know how to connect with other people, guess what you want to do? You want to learn academics. And you want to grow and you want to develop. It's like if we had special classes for when we first learned to talk and when we first learned to walk for those little 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds, we'd have all kinds of disability services. For the kid that was walking at, say, 14, 15 months, we'd call that a walking disability. And there'd be an industry all designed and medication and things to try to get that kid up on his feet a little bit quicker, when by the time he's 17, 18 months, it's not going to make any difference. And that's part of what I'm saying, is that there are things that are just natural processes to being human. Academics are one of them. And I also will tell people, I don't know why we need to memorize who were the Civil War generals. There's the internet, if you really want to know that, which we're carrying around in our pockets now. And so a lot of what we're still doing in schools is, I think, training people to be really good players on Jeopardy. But beyond that, I don't think there's a lot of usefulness for just memorizing certain things. And we call that academics, and I don't think that's what academics are about.
Well, yeah, and what about the idea that every single person is at a different place, and
Exactly.
no place higher or lower, not that it is higher or lower, is good or bad or better or worse, and the fact that why is it that everybody that's 6 years old is in kindergarten? Why is it that everybody is like 7 is in first grade? And
That's right.
it's
We don't segregate the
Yeah.
students by age. I mean, it's an all-age
Yeah, yeah.
school, 6th through 12th, and we target, certain things
Yeah.
for kids of certain ages, of course, because developmentally there are some differences. But this idea that everybody's supposed to read at age 6, and if you don't, you're disabled, that's what we're doing is creating all kinds of psychological problems.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You probably knew somebody. I certainly knew lots of kids that they were in the pullout. So, you're in your elementary school class and you're doing reading. And then are you one of the kids that has to get up and go into the resource room? And what trauma we put on that 8-year-old when they stand up and they've got to walk out of their room when reading comes to go down to the resource room for good intentions.
Yeah.
But the harm, the psychological harm and shame on that 8-year-old to have to go get special services, that's what I deal with
Because
sometimes.
there's nothing special about it, and there's
just-
nothing different, and we've created this stigma about the
That's
whole
exactly
thing, and
right.
that's what's so traumatizing. I have a good friend who happens to be the guy that well, let's not get into that, but he has a daughter that's like she's above at least everybody else in her class, and it's just too easy for
Right.
her, and
That's the other side too, this gifted thing.
Yeah.
There's gifted at one end,
Yeah.
which we do them harm.
why
There's
don't we
disabled.
recognize everybody as being, special for who they are,
That's
and
right.
regardless of what place they're at, and then creating an avenue for them to be able to travel whichever space and not making it any kind of a big deal. And that's
That's what I'm saying. It's not
Yeah.
that hard.
no, it's not.
We
hard
just
at
got to
all.
honor individuals.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we're set up now to make individuals fit into a system, and a system that's antiquated too. I mean, the schooling system that we have was set up during an industrial age to move just like a conveyor
By the way,
belt.
I have a bunch of questions about that, but for the interest of time, I think I'm probably going to hold back
Yes.
on them. But I think I could easily talk to you for several hours about this stuff. I've got like 10 questions here
Sure,
that
sure.
I'm probably going to skip right over.
You
but-
just tell me where you want me to take me.
But I would love to hear your. I would love to get together with you maybe a different time and chat about this again, or just outside of this and hear some of your answers to this kind of stuff,
You
because
bet.
I do have a lot of curiosities and I don't really know all the answers. But so is there any other schools that are similar to this?
Yeah.
Is this a particular model, or how did this?
Well, the model that we're using is something that in fact, let me answer it this way. Lots of people will call us and say, "How did you get started? And what would you recommend?" and that sort of thing. And there are lots of schools in this kind of umbrella that you might call first progressive
To
education.
me, it's a model of logic and reason.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I agree with you. So, I tell people this ain't rocket
It's
science.
only common sense, a model of common sense.
So what
but
is
anyhow,
it?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
let's you and me, Darryl, we'll say we have a new educational model. It's called the education of common sense, or common sense education. But what the titles generally are: progressive education, and that's kind of a big umbrella. The smaller ones have to do with things like free schools. So if you've heard of the free school
I have
movement,
heard of that.
so there are other schools that fall under that, or the democratic school movement, which also has where students have much more say. Some schools that even go to the point that the students in a true democratic school would vote every year on whether the teachers come back. So there are models like that as well. So yeah, there are lots of other schools that would
Oh,
be
cool.
cousins to ours. But what I tell people when they call me, can we model our program, our school after you? I said, you can take whatever the heck you want. But what I recommend that you do is you make sure that whatever it is, it comes from your heart.
Yeah.
So you can communicate on that level as opposed to just try to copy what somebody else is doing. Because copying, you can't emulate everything. You've got to really personalize it. And that's what we did when we got started. So, but there are, dozens of schools, hundreds of schools, I would say, across the world that have similar principles to what we have.
Wow. So I did have one question that I didn't want to skip over, but I was wondering, in your opinion, what was the intended message, and what are the pros and cons of the message from the movie Waiting for Superman?
Well, if you look at that, right, what they're talking about is the challenges in the school system, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that what I'm excited by things like that are that I think that we're catching up. Back when the school started in '94, a documentary like that, it's just not going to get made. For one, there aren't enough talking points with enough people for it to really land anywhere. I can talk to people now about the same principles that we were trying to put forth in 1994 and say, hey, 21st century education needs to look like this. And now there are enough people who go, oh, I know what you're talking about. And so that's what I think the basic message is that a lot of people recognize that the way that the mainstream educational system is being maintained is antiquated, and kids, I mean, that's who know it. They're so turned off. And it's just something they have to put up with, and they can't wait till they get out. It's like a jail.
Yeah,
in many ways.
I totally agree.
So that's what I think the basic message is.
Great. Okay, well, listen, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back, and we'll get into the stuff about the kindness.
Great.
And the trip to France.
Great.
You are listening to GreenerViews.
Gravity connects me to the earth, which connects me to people who connect me to myself more honestly. And gravity connects me to the crust, which connects to the leaves on the trees that make it possible to breathe.
Came to rest on the minefield, blessed with naive mind shield, like a helmet. They would tell us that we don't know how we feel or how to connect with other people on the planet. Oh, if we only knew the power in each blue disillusion little. In the vision of one resides all, destroy the individual, for this is critical. The self ain't everything, hands to grasp, to cling, to mask material vastly shipwrecked beings. At last, release the greed amassed with capitalist tasks and contact. The mass communication is all we have and dwindling fast.
All righty, welcome back to episode 37 of GreenerViews. We were hipping and hopping and getting down and all that fun stuff during the break there. We're back with Andy Smallman from PSCS, Puget Sound Community School, amongst other things that we're going to get right into here. Let's talk about your kindness classes. Tell us what those are and how those got started.
That's another elevator ride too, right? So,
alrighty.
They actually, the origin of them start before PSCS. I had a student of mine at the school that I had taught in before called the Little School who was really turned off to the amount of negativity that he kept seeing in the news. And this is back in like 1992, 1993. And he's this 12-year-old boy who's like, Andy, this is really disturbing me. And I said to him, well, what could you do different? And he said, well, what strikes me is what makes the news is the one car that doesn't make it home that's in the accident, not the thousands that do. And so he had the idea with a little guidance from me to start the Good News newspaper. And of course, things like good news tend to bore us, right? So because that's why we get fascinated by the car that doesn't make it home. So that kind of got my mind a-rolling a little bit, and from that I started talking more about kindness. There also, right in the early 90s, there was a bumper sticker that was out that was practice random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. And soon after that, I think it was the Pay It Forward movie and all of those things. There's just an energy about it. And then once PSCS started, that student, Johnny is his name, actually was one of our founding students. And he came and joined the school, and he and I continued this conversation. And what had also happened in that first year in 1994 is I'd managed to get all the students dial-up internet accounts. And that was a fascinating thing to everybody in 1994. In fact, so fascinating that Newsweek magazine sent a reporter out and followed us around to learn more what is going on in Seattle. And so we had a full page in Newsweek magazine about the fact that these kids were connected to something called the internet. And one of the things I managed to connect them in with was an email list that had survivors of concentration camps during World War II, Auschwitz and others, were now answering kids' questions who had accounts, had internet accounts. And I got my students involved in that. And that is where I put those two things together and said, what if we used a mailing list, these distribution lists, internet lists, and you could start a kindness class? And I developed this idea for weekly themes that would be an inspiration for something to do. And I had this image of, if you visualize like a globe and having people all at different parts of the world, each being inspired by the same idea, acting on it in whatever way they would choose to act on it, and then sharing what they did, it would cover the world in kindness. And that was the original idea back in 95 when I had my first online kindness class, was an email-based list that every Sunday night I'd send out an inspirational idea, hope that people would take it and do whatever they wanted to do with it. There's no right or wrong here. And then send back to all of us. So if you've got 10 people, you get my message on Sunday plus 10 messages in the next week of people all over the world and how they've done it, what they did to fulfill that idea. And that's what happened. And it was really exciting, and it started to grow, and it started to grow bigger, and it kind of took on a life of its own. But as the internet became more graphically based, the mailing list idea started to die away. And the responsibilities that I had with PSCS and growing the school, I kind of put the kindness stuff a little on hiatus. I continue to do in-person kindness classes with students, so they would be live classes and we'd go out and do acts, but it didn't involve people globally in the same way. A few years ago, I was asked to bring it back, and somebody said, you ought to try doing it using a WordPress blog. And I did that, and the Seattle Times caught wind of it, and they sent a reporter out, and that article that the Seattle Times wrote ended up on the wire, and it went, and I was getting calls from all over North America where papers had run the story, and people wanted to know how they could be involved. Then Al Gore's speechwriter, when he was the vice president, a guy named Dan Pink, tweeted it, or excuse me, he blogged about it as this great idea. I actually got a chance to meet him. Deepak Chopra tweeted it, and before you know it, I've got hundreds of people, which is great, because it doesn't matter to me how many people are involved. The more the merrier for what I'm doing. So I started expanding it and creating, and this is kind of funny, I always put it in quotes, advanced kindness classes. It's like, how do you have a kindness class in the first place? You just try to tap into people's already inherent kind wisdom that they have. But the advanced classes would use a book or some kind of inspirational focal point that we would all have, like a reading assignment. Let's all read the chapter on generosity and complete an act of generosity. So I would kind of formulate it that way. And I've come up with other things to do. While I was on sabbatical, which you've referenced, so the school year 2010-11, my wife and I took our daughters to France and lived in France for a year. And while we were there, Melinda and I can't just, enjoy a sabbatical. We started something, we call it Kind Living. It's kindliving.net. And that's where you can tap into all the things that we're doing around kindness. And so I've been blogging. I blogged for the Random Acts of Kindness Foundation. I'm now blogging for Ode Magazine. They've asked me to do some work with them. And so the kindness thing is just, it gets right to the root of a lot of what's at the heart of PSCS, but that's what it's about. I've got, I just had a class wrap up last Sunday, a week ago yesterday, and I got another one I'll be starting in August. And if people want to join in, they are welcome. There's no cost involved. Just come have fun. And we're going to be reading a book called A Kind Man, which is a really short novelette as a focusing agent, and a 4-week class in August. So,
yeah, and what I was going to say about that, that's one of the things I'd gotten introduced to, I think, when you started again with the blog.
I think so, yeah.
And one thing I would encourage people to do is, first of all, do it. But even if you don't do it, just to be participating and finding out about all the great books.
Yeah, it's...
Because I've gotten all the books, and every one of them was fantastic.
Yeah, well, these are things that I found inspirational for me, and that they connect in. And I think the common denominator, if there is one, in the books that I like to use for this, is that it taps into something of what it means to be human. So, there's when you start talking about kindness, who's not going to smile in some level.
So what's the URL on that one?
So if they want to dial in and get to know more about the kindness-related things, it's real simple. It's just kindliving.net.
Yeah, is that your site?
Yeah, that's Melinda designs the look. And
I'm on the email list, and I get it all the time, but I never paid attention to where it's coming from because I signed up for it 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah,
great. Yeah, that's where it is. And you also can connect to the blogs, or people can write to me if they want.
And it's really cool because what you do is you encourage people to write in about their experiences and stuff after each week, and then you just, you see nothing but great stuff going on.
That's what happens. I mean, it's just and if you want to focus on positive, that's what it's supposed to be. If you want to focus on positive, that's focusing on the positive. And I don't require people to do anything. I just read it if they want. Yeah. And it's on a blog, so you don't even have to officially sign up. But I like to know who's out there.
So let's talk a little bit more about the trip to France.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst for doing that, and
Wow,
what was the
yeah.
experience like?
That here we're on another elevator. How big is this building? So the catalyst is a couple. One, so Melinda and I have a couple of kids. The oldest actually has just finished her first year in college. She's 19, and the youngest is 15. And so a couple years ago, the oldest had just graduated from PSCS. She was 17 at the time. And the youngest had finished what would age-wise, although again, at this point, grades aren't that important, but she'd finished age-wise what would be 7th grade. And so it was a perfect time for us personally. As a catalyst, a long-held dream of Melinda's and mine was to live for a year with our kids in France and having that cultural experience. So that was a big piece of it. But another one that we'd talked about, Melinda and I, for a long time is the importance of the school being able to outlive its founders. And so I appreciate the fact that our board recognized an opportunity for the organization as well. Melinda dubbed it the pie truck scenario, which is kind of a funny thing. You hear about you don't want to go out and get hit by the bus, and then what happens? And she said, a bus, it's the diesel fumes. It's just not so nice. But hey, you get hit by a pie truck. There's a little boy holding a pie on the side of the it's much prettier. And so anyways, the pie truck scenario is what would happen if we suddenly got taken out. And this was an opportunity for the school to experience a year without us being around. And so it was a stretching for the school as well. So that was the second piece. And what we did is we have some family friends who live in the city of Nantes, which is a couple hours by train from Paris towards the west. It's a fairly big town, I think the 6th largest town in France. And so they found us a place to live, and our youngest ended up in what would have been a middle school, fully immersed in French. Wow. The older daughter, who just had graduated, got herself into the foreign exchange program in the University of Nantes, and became fluent in French by studying with kids from young people. I shouldn't even call them kids, some in their 20s, from all over the world. Wow. And Melinda and I, we'd walk our daughter to school, and we'd walk home, and we got to really relax and enjoy our company without having to do a lot of things related to PSCS. And we started the Kind Living Network. That's kindliving.net. So yeah, that's cool. That's what happened.
So what kind of educational system do they have in France?
That's a long question to answer as well. It's very standardized. So you should be able to go from one school in France to the next school in France pretty simply. So it's not really the kind of educational system that I'm a big proponent of. Yeah. It's very regimented, very rigid, where the teachers are most certainly authority figures. My daughter, who is a PSCS student, was before she left and is again upon a return.
Must have been a little different.
It's a little different, but I mean, part of it is that she's resilient, and I think some of her character, some of her parenting, some of the school she attends. But she would comment that when an adult enters the room, you stand up, and you don't sit down until you're given permission to sit down. And that's a big element, is the kind of respect that you're to show your elders in a French school. And that would be different than, how I would structure something as well. So it's just more test-based. That's how you measure. And this is what you're going to do kind of educational system.
So not knowing at all about your thoughts before about it, most of anything except for some of your kindness stuff that Sure. I've been tuned in on, how did the experience change your thoughts and your about your life in the United States and your thoughts towards the United States from being somewhere else for an entire year?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question, and one that I don't know if anyone's asked me quite that way before, but Melinda and I actually had thought about it a lot. The biggest thing that we took away, to put it frankly, is how different the news is in France, or in Europe even, to the United States. What we found is in France, if something happens that in the United States we would have somebody on the scene broadcasting live and staying there for the 5, 7, and 11 o'clock broadcasts, in France that's kind of seen as that's their business. If they're in a car accident, that's kind of private. And it's not breaking news or whatever might happen. So the coverage is the way I would put it is it's much more level-headed. And a lot of things are that way, where in the United States, it just feels like we're always competing for people's attention, or we sensationalize, or we make something bigger that's not so big. That was a pronounced experience for us. And the other thing that's related to that is we really found how much we're both impacted by the negativity that our news seems to focus on. And so we've more or less done a basic news fast since we've been back, and don't pay as much of attention to, those breaking stories that you get every different angle on every different thing, and then we're going to beat it into the ground for 3 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
So we've tried to stay away from that. So that's some of our experience. And the other thing is just how more globally aware people seem to be in France and in other areas that I think we're very insular in the United States. And I know I'm speaking in generalizations, but that was some of our takeaways.
I've heard that in general about most other countries. Like, they have more of an understanding about what's going on, not only with the United States, but the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And people in the United States tend to be a lot more focused on just the United States.
Yeah, that was our experience,
Yeah.
is feeling much more of that people seem to be more globally aware.
So who or what has had the biggest impact on your life so far?
Who or what has had the biggest impact on
Yeah.
my life? Wow, there's so many different things that have an impact. I think some of the things that come to my mind have to do more with some specific experiences, and I've told
Great.
you a couple of them. Is the 3rd grade, the 12th grade types of things. Those have
The radio station in Alaska?
radio station, being a big brother, meeting people that I've met at particular times, being open to opportunity and learning how to do that. But I think that's the big kind of stuff. And I can tell you a story to kind of illustrate that if you want me
Great.
to. So I mentioned that I went to the Evergreen State College to become a teacher, and I was doing all the things that you would do when you first arrive in college to get set up to get into the teacher training program. But then one day I was in a class, and the woman who was in charge of what they call the independent study, or the internship program, came in to explain to people what that was about while you're at Evergreen. And she happened to mention that a father with a severely brain-injured 6-year-old boy had come into Evergreen and was hoping to find an Evergreen student who might do some internship work. And I just knew. I can't even explain to you why. I just knew I was supposed to do that.
Wow.
That night I was in their house, and because of that, I reorganized my undergraduate work. And I started working with this little boy, and then another 6-year-old, and then an 18-year-old autistic kid. And my focus became looking at how we learn rather than just on becoming another teacher. It took me then into grad school, where I did get my teaching certificate and that sort of thing. But just being open to opportunity. Had I kept my narrow focus, I wouldn't even have recognized that this was an opportunity for me. I wouldn't even have seen it. That I was willing on a dime basically to change where I thought I was going into where I discovered I was really meant to go. So it's experiences like that I think it's an attitude or an awareness or a trust that call it the universe or whatever, offers us opportunity. We just need to say yes.
They've been numerous, and they just continue to happen.
Yeah, that's my belief.
So I know that I had mentioned that your book ideas and stuff have been great on me. What about a recent movie or a book, something real recent that's been influential to you?
I haven't seen a lot of movies since we've been back, but the book that I say, hey, I wish I'd written it, is the one I just used in the kindness class, The Power of Kindness, by Ferrucci. I just think it's a fabulous, fabulous book that I encourage people to take a look at. And then if people are looking for something else to read, the best book that I've ever read that's been moving to me, and I read it in France, is called My Grandfather's Blessings by Rachel Naomi Remen.
I think you recommended that on the kindness class,
did.
didn't you? I have that.
Yeah, it touches me.
I think you recommended it twice.
I probably have, and I'll call it 3 times. And if you give me another minute, I might recommend it again.
Great, yeah, My Grandfather's Blessings.
Yeah, it's a fabulous book. If you want to know more of how my mind works, read that book.
So, how do you maintain such a hopeful and positive attitude?
How can you not when you meet people? If you really allow yourself to talk to people heart to heart instead of head to head, you can't help but be positive and optimistic. I just love people, and it's fun to meet people, and you do it with a smile. Everything comes together for you. So I don't know how to answer that other than that's just the way it is. Isn't that how it's supposed to work, Daryl? Isn't that the way the world works?
Well, there's no particular way to answer anything on this show. And so what about one thing that most any person can do that would have a positive impact on the world?
Do something kind for yourself today.
Great.
I mean, that's where it starts. It's the air mask. Put your own air mask on before you help the person next to you on the airplane. You got to take care of yourself. So find something that gives you a little bit of joy or a little bit of happiness or something that just you feel good about doing, and don't wait. Go do it.
Perfect. So let's go through them. Let's see, how do people find out about or get involved with the Puget Sound Community School?
Yeah, that's you can come to the website. That's simple, pscs.org. If they want to give a call, we're 206-324-4350. If they want to write to me, I'm easy to get a hold of, and I don't mind at all. I try to get back to everybody as quickly as I can. Andy@pscs.org. That's all school-related kinds of things. And if they want to tap into the kindness stuff, all of those ways will get to me. But the kindliving.net website and Andy@kindliving.net is another way to reach me. And then there's a blog. I mean, there's so many ways. Type my name into Google and you'll probably figure something out.
Is there any specific particular upcoming events or anything that you want to get out there?
Yeah, the one that I mentioned earlier is the kindness class, the 4-week class that begins in August called A Kind Man, and we're going to be reading this book, A Kind Man.
And that's a short one,
It's a short one. Yeah, the book's really short. It's a novelette, and I read it just a few weeks ago, and I thought, this will be interesting. It's really a simple book, and I haven't decided yet, actually, how I'm going to run that. We'll see. But it will probably be a similar format. So that's coming up in August. I'm actually leaving on Thursday for my family. All 4 of us are going to France for a month, leaving 3 days from now. So I'll be a little bit harder to reach, but email still will get to me. And so then that kindness class when we get back, and then with school-related things, we'll be looking for people who like to volunteer. You don't have to have any teaching experience. If you're interested, if you've got something you love doing, you should contact me, and I'll tell you how you can get involved in the school. Share something you love. I tell people to volunteer at PSCS, to offer something to students, you really have to do one main thing. You just have to share something you love. It's that.
It's an incredible experience. I encourage anybody to do it if they can. I had an opportunity on a small level to go a couple times and speak, and it's been inspiring to me ever since. It's been years now.
Yeah, and you should come back. That's the other thing that we do for people that are volunteering to offer a class, which meets typically once a week for 10 sessions, so 10 weeks. But not everybody can do that. Yeah. So there's also guest speaking opportunities, and those typically happen on Fridays. And the way we do it is we tell the students, hey, we got this guy. He does this, this, and this. If you're interested in coming, let us know. And we might have 3, 5, 10 students who are interested. Yeah. And we sit around and we make it into a very casual kind of conversation.
We didn't even do a lot of talking about how the students pick the classes and the teachers pick the classes. We didn't talk about the circle. Is it before and after?
It is. It's the start and the end of the day, and you can see it. You can see that in the Kindness School video.
Yeah.
So
Great. Well, we always ask somebody to leave us with one piece of helpful hint or wise advice or words of wisdom.
Yeah, well, hopefully my do something kind for yourself will work for that particular purpose. Those are always my words of wisdom. But if you take it one step out, let's say that you've mastered that particular one, and not everybody does. So that's always come back. But another level out is maybe do something kind for someone that's close to you as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. On behalf of Randy and Michael and myself, you've been listening to GreenerViews, episode 37 with Andy Smallman from the Puget Sound Community School. It's been a real blessing and I've been real grateful for the opportunity. It's everything I expected it to be and more. You can send feedback, advice, if you want to sponsor or donate or advertise on GreenerViews, info@greenerviews.net, 206-650-4587. Check out AmbrosiaDigitalMedia.com. HealthyHomecast.com, youtube.com/GreenerViews. And I think that's it. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great night.
Thank you for listening. GreenerViews is part of the Healthy Homecast Network. Check out all their conscientious and sustainably focused podcast programs and businesses at healthyhomecast.com. GreenerViews is created, developed, and produced by Daryl Whalen. Our audio engineer is Randy Parcel. Our video producer is Michael Schwartz of AmbrosiaDigitalMedia.com. Music for this episode was provided by SlapJazz.com, DanFagens.bandcamp.com, and JDHobson.com. Your feedback is important. Please feel free to contact us with any comments or questions, including suggestions for guests and program topics. You can call us at 206-650-4587 or send a direct email to info@greenerviews.net. Be sure to check back often. New episodes coming soon.